Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jacob LaQuire. And today we have a lot to get into, and we're going to start with the moral victory on Sunday, a game that I did not think would be close, a game that would be lost by two or more possessions, was won at the last second by a game-winning field goal by the Kansas City Chiefs after Bryce Young and the Panthers clawed back into the game with a incredible drive at the end of the game that was capped off by a Chuba Hubbard touchdown run and 2-point conversion. So really, I think this game was a testament that reflected Bryce Young's strengths, the reason why he was the number one overall pick. And then it also showed that towards the end of the game, when we leaned into the identity of running the football and keeping drives alive, we were able to pull within and almost pull off the victory.
For sure. I've never been so happy in a loss where I didn't want our team to lose on purpose. Like, there are years when we're vying for a top pick and it's like, all right, like versus the Saints a couple years ago. It's like, all right, we lost this game, better draft pick. Yay, woohoo. But this game, I felt really good even after that loss. I felt bad in the moment because Mahomes, had like the 35-yard scamper down the sideline where he did his thing where he faked like he was going to go out of bounds but kept going in. Should be a penalty, by the way. It's like the fake slide. But they end up kicking the field goal, whatever. They win by 3 points. But before that, we had brought it back. Going in right before half, it was 20-6. And we brought it back to 27-27. Excellent game, particularly in the second half, like you said. Thought Bryce Young was outstanding in the second half. The defense really came to life in the second. But if only they carried that over to the first half. Well, Bryce wasn't bad in the first half, but the defense was a bit of a sieve and gave up 20 points, and that ultimately was the game. But yeah, let's start with the positives. And you have written down here a lot of the Bryce Young statistics, and I think it's like hard to ignore him being the main positive in this game because he was dialed in all over the place. Against man coverage, was shredding Spags' defense. He was pressured a ton, blitzed a ton, and still got the ball out on time where it needed to be. He hit a bunch of different receivers. David Moore in particular had quite the day as kind of like the safety valve guy. And he was just effective and efficient throughout the game. And it was almost enough to pull off the victory. But like you said, got away from us there in the final. It was under the 2-minute warning when they got the ball back. So they had their 3 timeouts and were still able to move the ball down the field, unfortunately. But there was a lot to like and a lot to take away from and a positive light with this game for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, Bryce Young had a performance when we look at expected points added, so an efficiency metric on a per play basis. He was in the 73rd percentile with this Sunday's performance for individual games. And then 5 big time throws, tied for the most this past week with Caleb Williams and Sam Darnold. 11 for 14 for 123 yards and a touchdown against the blitz, 9 of 16 for 165 yards for 10 plus air yard throws. So he was able to push the ball downfield, do it accurately, on time, in rhythm. There was some great play designs. The one that comes to mind the most is the Adam Thielen on, I believe it was 3rd and 1, and just a beautiful route to get him open down the sideline. Bryce Young hits him in stride. It's plays like that that gives you hope that, okay, this is something that you can build a franchise around, that you can continue building and growing as a coaching staff and a team. And it really does feel like the culture is being set. And you got to give the props to Dave Canales for sticking with it because it wasn't looking good halfway through the year. And coming out of the bye, this is definitely a huge victory for the team as they head down the stretch with some very winnable games. So a lot to like. My question for you is, and we aren't the biggest PFF fans for a lot of reasons, but their grading provides content and things where people can discuss. And this is where I think we can jump in and go, based on what you saw on Sunday, who did you think were the 5 best graded players? And I'll let you know if PFF agrees or not.
All right, so I'm going to go Bryce. He obviously had an incredible game.
He's at 1.
Yeah. David Moore had quite the game as well. I think he had 8 catches 10 catches for, I believe, 80 yards and a touchdown. He had himself quite a day. I think Cade Mays
second on it. So you got the first 2.
Pretty good. I thought Cade Mays played pretty well despite like having Chris Jones as his assignment. I thought he was really good, but I'm not sure with the constant pressure he faced if he's going to be up there. But he would be one of my top 5 guys for sure. That whole entire
The
group would be considered for that. Robert Hunt, Caden Mays, Damian Lewis. Any of them top 5?
No, the other three that are top five are going to be on the defensive side of the ball.
What?
So I definitely agree with you. The offensive line did its job, but the way PFF grades, the guys that are on the list are defense.
Okay, Wanham there, DJ Wanham.
Wanham is there. He is at 4. So you are
Uh,
missing the number
Clowney.
3 and number 5. Clowney's at 3, and then
Yeah,
at
and
5,
is it a DB?
it is not a DB. It's a
Are you
linebacker.
sure? Oh, linebacker, Josie Jewell.
Josie Jewell
He's
comes in at 5th.
he's come along since he came back from injury. I think he's been playing quite well. At the start of the year, he was kind of iffy, but really in that Giants game, you could say he single-handedly, him and Ashawn Robinson won us that game. And then he played quite well in this game, according to PFF. So a lot to like there. You talk about the defense, and while I said in the first half they were quite a negative factor, and I think that's fair. They allowed 4 scoring drives in the first half. Really couldn't get the Chiefs off the field, kept them out of the end zone a couple of times when they got down there. They were helped by a lot of penalties by the Chiefs on one drive. And Charles Davis, the commentator, was saying, sometimes you think the refs they're being mean to your team, but they have to call what they see. That's because the Chiefs were committing fouls on like every play on one of their drives in the second half. But once the second half started, or second quarter, once the second half started, they allowed 1 touchdown drive early. And then after that, lights out up until the final drive of the game, where one person in particular, I think, kind of gave the game away. You asked me who you thought were the 5 best graded players with PFF. Who do you think was the worst player on the day on defense for the Panthers in this game? Because I can point to one guy who not only gave up a touchdown, was quite poor in coverage, but also didn't get Mahomes down on that scramble that led to the ensuing field goal. So who was your worst graded, Stephen Patton, worst graded player this week?
If I had to guess, the guy that you're talking about who sold the game, it would be one Mr. Dane Jackson. And unfortunately, he has not been the signing we wanted him to be from Buffalo. Obviously, he dealt with an injury to start the year, but it is good to see a guy like JC Horn do his job on the other side. And he did allow a couple, I would say, comeback and out route catches, but he was on the receiver's hip. I think at one point it was a tight end, another time it was Hopkins. And you definitely want to see pass breakups in those instances. But I love when he's right there, he's able to make the tackle and pretty much keep a big yak play from happening. That is still a valuable asset to have in a cornerback, even if they aren't able to break up the pass.
Yeah, and talking about that defense, especially in the second half, we got 5 total sacks on Patrick Mahomes on Sunday. Nobody's done that this year. That was our most sacks by far coming into this week. I believe there were 2 in the first half and 3 in the second half. A lot of them were on third downs or in the red zone, pushing them out. One of them was in the first half. It was a led to the field goal attempt because they got Mahomes. It was Clowney who came around and while Mahomes was running, slapped his leg and got him down. So a lot of key sacks in this game. The pass rush seems to have come along a lot since Wanham's in there. He's affecting the quarterback, getting pressure on him. 5 sacks is huge. Them stepping up in the second half is huge. But it was really them allowing the tight ends, both Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, who had a pair of touchdowns on the day. That was, I think, the difference maker for our defense in particular, was allowing them to run free across the middle, underneath, stuff like that. We weren't dialed in on the tight ends like you and I thought we should have been. That was our big pregame thing was, right, hey, we need to have a safety and a linebacker over and under the tight ends at all times. Didn't have that. And to me, that was the key difference. You can't look any further than the very first drive where we allowed a 60-yard kick return to start the game. So when that happened, I was like, oh, great, here we go, right? And then I believe it was the third or fourth play from scrimmage for the Chiefs where Noah Gray runs across and comes. He's just sitting wide open, nobody even close to him, and just runs 10 yards after the catch into the end zone. Gotta watch the tight ends more, especially when we're going to be facing Cade Otton upcoming this week. He's no Travis Kelce. He might be a little bit of Noah Gray, but we got to key in on that. That was the big mistake, I thought, for the team. What was the big takeaway for you? What held us back in this game where we were surprisingly close at the end? What could have pushed us over the edge?
So on early downs, we kept the Chiefs' success rate to a little above 50%. It was at like 53.4 on the day. Their late down success rate, and that's pretty much your ability to kind of convert a third or fourth down into a first down, was about 62 and a half. So even though several of the sacks on the day came on third downs that forced punts that allowed the team to get back in the game, for the vast majority of it, they were able to move the ball at will. And when you go up against a team in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Liam Cohen, with Baker Mayfield, getting Mike Evans back, Kate Otten, like you said, kind of coming into his own. Bucky Irving's looked phenomenal as a rookie. Rashad White's been a factor in the passing game. And those elements, you go, okay, they can do some of the things that the Chiefs just did in terms of, hey, using one of their stars to kind of clear out the middle of the field and give some of these opportunities. So that's what I'm kind of seeing could be kind of carryover residual. And if you can't clean that up, it's just going to be long afternoon after long afternoon on these Sundays. And it puts Bryce in a situation where he's got to go out and score 20 to 30 plus points a game just so that we're staying in it to have a chance at the end.
Well, the good news is we just saw him do that against a pretty tough defense with Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs. A couple more things I liked. Obviously, us moving the ball down the field. We scored on 75% of our drives. At 8 drives, only punted twice. I believe we were the third team since Andy Reid came to the Chiefs to score on 75% or more of your drives. It's pretty impressive. The bad part with that is, especially early in the game, when we would get into the red zone, we would stall out. The first drive, we got really close, just couldn't convert, field goal. Second time we got in the red zone, no touches for Chuba Hubbard. I think we started at the 12-yard line. I think that's where the passing play ended up. Chuba didn't get any touches. It was 3 missed throws. One of them, I think, would have been an incredible acrobatic catch by David Moore, where he's doing the lean away catch there. Didn't get it, so we have to settle for another field goal. Then right before the half, when we have the under 2-minute drive, again, our 2-minute offense, man, it's like the best offense we've seen all year. Move the ball down the field about had to have been 70 yards because it was a kickoff. The big throw to JT Sanders on the left side, where Bryce is getting blasted, throws it up to him, reminiscent of the Saints game, right, where he did that. Pretty much the exact same play structure there, exact same spot of the field. Throw to David Moore, throw to JT Sanders on the right side, where he ends up getting injured. And we learned yesterday that it's not a concussion, it's a neck injury. He's moving and everything, so he's like all right, but I think he's going to be missing some time. And then we got down there and ended up kicking a field goal again because 3 missed throws, some out of the back of the end zone. Tommy Tremble dropped one right over the middle. And then the third one, the DB just smacked it out of, I think it was Legat's hands. So converting in the red zone at the first or during the first half of the game was an issue. But then in the second half, we had 3 scoring drives, 2 touchdowns, another field goal. If we could carry that into the first half, to me, that was what was the difference maker. Like the fact that it was 20-9 going into the half. It was 20-6 with like a minute left in the half. If it were, say, 20-13, maybe you're looking at the Chiefs having to drive all the way down and get a touchdown to tie the game at the end instead of a field goal.
Yeah, and maybe they would have kept their foot on the gas a little bit more. Again, this is a team that jumped out to a 20-6 lead before the Panthers were able to make it 20-9 going to halftime. And I think shortly after halftime, they were able to extend that lead and put 7 more on the board. So it's one of those things that they might have kept scoring if the Panthers had scored and converted some of those field goals into touchdowns. I think the biggest thing is defenses are starting to clue in on some of the in-breaking and slant routes that Xavier Legette runs in the red zone. A lot of safety help the Chiefs had in terms of guarding Legette. And sometimes it wasn't even the red zone. There were a couple plays where we were around midfield. And again, Legette's coming across the middle of the field and the safety's ready to drive on that ball if Bryce wanted to put it there. So with him kind of getting taken out of the picture in some of those scenarios, it was awful to see JT Sanders go down, because I think in the instance, had he run the route that Tommy Tremble did a couple plays later, he actually comes down with that, and that is 6 points. So I think it's very critical to get him back in the lineup so that we have another reliable target in the red zone. And then also don't be afraid to run the ball when you're inside the 20. Obviously, right before half, that's not something you can really game plan towards. But I think in those first 2 drives, when you're moving the ball and you're now in the red zone, Chuba Hubbard really didn't get any touches. And if you don't feel comfortable necessarily handing it to him against the Chiefs run defense, try to set up a screen, get him the ball so your playmaker can start making plays. And he did down the stretch. So I think he's definitely earned that right to be a feature in this offense and not somebody that's forgotten in those circumstances.
For sure. And that kind of like leads into the Dave Canales portion of the conversation here. We've had our gripes with him as a play caller, maybe some of the decisions between Bryce and Andy and like the verbiage throughout the year. But I thought, aside from the early red zone gaffes, I thought his game plan was excellent throughout the rest of the game. You talk about the Thielen play, which is reminiscent of, we were talking about it, like when it would be a 4th and 1 or 3rd one with Cam Newton, and then have Greg Olsen pull and come open, or Chris Manhertz or somebody pull and come open. That's what that reminded me of. The deep plays early in the game, the one to Leggett where he comes all the way across and catches it and runs to about like the 8 or 9 yard line there. Like that was a really good design too. A lot of the David Moore crossers were good designs as well. You got to credit Bryce for hitting those, but a lot of these guys were open throughout the day. And I think that the credit goes to Canales for the route concepts, first of all. The Devin Tompkins little jet sweep too, that was really nice. But the route concepts and the sequencing, I thought Canales had greatly improved in this aspect, even in the loss. And then after the game in the Sunday presser, we got the usual question, right? It's like, what do you take away? How did Bryce play? How did everybody play? And he said, each week I've come up here and had to make a statement about who the QB is going to be. But today Bryce made that statement himself. And somebody said, well, does that mean he's going to play next Sunday? And Canales said, absolutely. So it seems we've closed the book, or at least for now, on the whole discourse about press conferences and how Canales treats Bryce differently than Andy Dalton, all that kind of stuff. I think we saw maturity on the field from both the player and coach, and in the press box with Canales talking like that. So I myself am very optimistic, even following a loss, with the future of this franchise. However, we can't do it just once, right? Even though this was a great team as the Super Bowl champs, the number 1 AFC seed, we got to continue this moving forward, because we have the Buccaneers this upcoming week. We have a tough one against Philly, and then we'll have more, quote, like winnable games down the stretch. That's where I'm really going to be optimistic if we can string this performance into the next couple of games moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be huge to kind of catapult and use this as a snowball effect. And this is important because prior to this game, and I want you to include last year's rookie year, when do you think he had a game or performance like this? Like, when was the last time he played at this kind of level?
Maybe the Packers game. And the Packers game, their defense was horrible. They fired their defensive coordinator following the season. But Bryce was making, let me say this, even in that game, he had a poor first half. Now that I can think back and remember on it, it was the second half where he really got stuff going. I thought he played a complete game this week, except for a couple throws into the end zone. I thought he missed a couple there. But overall, I thought this week was far and away Bryce Young's best game as a pro, even though it was in a loss. He's led the team to wins. I thought this was his best performance for sure. And the one throw that I think caps it all off was right before the start of the fourth quarter. It was actually the last play of the third quarter. It's like a 3rd and I think 11, because we lost a yard on a run. Spagnuolo runs cover 0. It's not cover 0, but he brings 2 free blitzers. Bryce is getting absolutely destroyed by Karlaftis and whoever 27 is on the Chiefs. Throws it up before David Moore's even out of his break. Perfect ball placement, converts the down, and that led to the second it was the field goal drive of the fourth quarter. So that's the kind of play that I'm encouraged by with Bryce, and for sure, to me, this is his best game, bar none, as a NFL professional quarterback.
Yeah, and I just simply wanted to ask that question because I agree that probably the next best performance after this past week against Kansas City was that Green Bay game in the bank. And so what's interesting is you look at the 2 games that came after it, the offense was shut out in Jacksonville and then at home against Tampa Bay. And Bryce Young played well, I think, in both of those games. It was just the team left points on the field. And that's, I think, the scary factor when you start looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are not a bad team, the Philadelphia Eagles in a couple of weeks. And so you can't just take this moral victory and then loosen up a little bit. Whatever you did to prepare for the Kansas City Chiefs, you need to double down and keep doing that the rest of the way. You cannot let your foot off the gas and think that, oh, we're a good team now. You're a good team because of how you prepared for this game, and that can't change. So these are consummate pros. They are building a culture. I have hope that they can do that. I just want to kind of put a forewarning because the last time we saw a performance like this, it went downhill really fast.
For sure. Thankfully, DJ Chark is not on the team right now. We have maybe we've eschewed his drops off to another person, Xavier Leggett.
That wears 17. Yeah, same number.
On some of those downfield ones. And at least Leggett took charge of it. He said he actually said on Monday that he had texted Bryce after the game and said, you couldn't have put it in a better spot. I'm going to make that play next time. It's good to see him taking accountability there. You talked about how this is a moral victory. And this is the last thing I want to touch on before we move on to other games. Both Dave Canales and the presser said, we need to move beyond moral victories. Like, we need to prepare and stuff like that. Like, we can't settle for this. And Bryce Young following the game. This is coming from JC Horn. It's like a secondhand report, kind of. He said Bryce Young had like a speech to the locker room at the end, something to the effect of, we shouldn't be surprised that this is the outcome. We're supposed to be in these games. It doesn't matter if it's the number 1 seed Chiefs or the number 1 in the NFC, whatever. We are good enough. We can prepare enough to be in these games. And moving forward, this is the kind of culture we need to have, is having like gritty, tough games and actually pushing through and finishing in the end, like the Giants game, like the Saints game. And then you talked about how next week we might be facing tougher opponents. That brings back the old adage of, you rise to the occasion when you play opponents. Well, that's not necessarily true. You fall back to your level of preparation when you're playing teams that might be tougher than you. So if you can, like you said, double down on what you did for the Chiefs game, heading, they're staying in Carolina for the Tampa Bay game, but then heading up to Philly for that, and then coming back. I think it's the Cardinals after that one, might be the Cowboys. I don't know. But if you can like prepare even more for those, I don't see why those games can't be competitive. And like why we can't win those games. I actually think we have a good chance against Tampa at home next week, but we'll talk about that a little more later. Do you have any other notes about this past game you want to touch on?
No, I think that did a good job of wrapping up summation of what happened on Sunday and what we're looking forward to moving on. And moving ahead a couple days, Thanksgiving is going to feature 3 primetime games, and we wanted to talk about kind of
prime time. In quotation marks. Yeah.
The prime time in the sense that everybody's going to be at home, probably watching these games, and just kind of wanted to give a rundown of our thoughts. I don't think 2 of these games might be close, but that's something that we'll get into. And at the noon slate, the first game, and the Lions usually kick off this slate, and they're usually the team kind of losing on Thanksgiving Day. And over the past couple of years, they've kind of flipped that narrative, and they are a massive favorite at home against the Bears. The last 2 times that we saw Detroit play at home, they dropped 52 points, and I think allowed their opponents to average, I want to say a little under 10 points, if I remember correctly. So again, this is a stalwart team at home, and they don't lose, and they typically mop the floor. So do you see that being any different with a team that has now lost back-to-back heartbreaking losses to division opponents?
I don't. The Lions, like you said, they take care of business at home. This is where they're going to score their 50 points every game. And while the Bears, I think, have been improved since, I know it breaks your heart to say it, but since Thomas Brown has taken over, I think the offense has been a bit better. They've actually scored offensive touchdowns. And I think the defense is still, at worst, probably league average. This might be a tough matchup early, maybe. I think it could be close like in the first quarter, kind of like how we saw the Titans game go back and forth in the first quarter. It was Calvin Ridley had 2 touchdowns, remember, in the first quarter when they played the Titans. And then the Lions scored 52 in 3 quarters. So I could see it kind of being like that. I just looked up the moon for Thanksgiving. Do you remember the old Lions waxing gibbous moon thing? How they never win when that's their moon? It's a waning crescent. So the moon curse might not be there. I think the Lions are going to come away with this one. But like from the Bears' perspective, like you said, 2 really back-to-back heartbreakers, right? The blocked field goal against division opponents, too. The blocked field goal versus the Packers, and then taking the Vikings to overtime. They had the first drive in overtime, the Bears did, and then punted it away, and the Vikings drove down like 90 yards and settled for like a field goal from the 6-yard line. So really heartbreaking losses. I don't think this one's going to be a heartbreaker. I think it's going to be a blowout. And like you said, this probably won't be one of the closer games, but I am looking forward to seeing how Caleb Williams continues to play in the new structure. And I'm not saying Thomas Brown is reinventing the wheel or anything. He's not like drawing up super cool concepts of players, routes, and everything, but he's using the good players quote. This past week, DJ Moore ran 55 of 55 routes. Odunze ran 54 of 55. Not Caleb Williams. Keenan Allen ran 53 of 55. Cole Kmet ran 48 of 55. He has his main playmakers out there. He's not getting cute with anything. And they're getting the ball into DJ Moore's hands on screens a lot, and he's produced a ton over the past 2 weeks with those screen passes. I think it's 7 for 7, over 100 yards, and a touchdown coming off screens. I think he's using the strengths of the players more to the advantage as opposed to trying to fit those players into his system. And I think that's working for Caleb Williams a lot, but who has struggled as a rookie. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that against a Detroit defense, which isn't necessarily world beaters by any means, especially up front.
Yeah. So here's the interesting take on the Bears is, yes, they have run an increase of screenplays. I think they've leaned more into the run game. They've leaned more into 11 personnel and just skill position players out in the field, which is a smart thing to do. But all right, we're there. We're still there. Poor Wi-Fi connection, so hang tight with us while I think we're back on air. But in regards to Caleb Williams in this offense, he's evading sacks now and actually breaking loose and running for first downs. He wasn't doing this when Shane Waldron was the offensive coordinator. No matter what play call it is, if you're now just magically escaping the pocket, to me, this is Thomas Brown. He's a good leader. He's a good communicator. And that is the difference maker that we're seeing because some of these players are giving effort. I saw a play a couple of weeks ago, the game that ended up getting Shane Waldron fired against the Patriots. Perfect screen to DJ Moore where they're trying to get their star player the ball. And Keenan Allen lets 2 defenders run right by him and make the play. Like if you block one of those guys, DJ Moore might take that to the house or you're in the red zone now and have a scoring opportunity. And so if the difference between Shane Waldron and Thomas Brown is just simplifying a little bit more and the players are executing, then that's really the difference they needed. And Thomas Brown has earned the nod here over the past couple of weeks. Do I think that's going to be enough against the Lions? No. I could see the Lions kind of incorporating a similar game plan that we saw last year when the 49ers played the Dallas Cowboys. And that's pretty much understanding that they're going to want to get the ball out quick to avoid the pass rush, to avoid Caleb Williams making mistakes. They'll crowd the line of scrimmage, make the tackles, stop the run game, and they're going to have Caleb Williams, if the Bears want to stay in this game, win it by passing the ball. And we've seen him struggle, even in Thomas Brown's offense, to throw deep. And if he can't hit some of these deep connections, it's going to be a long day in favor of the Lions.
Yeah, the only deep passes I remember him throwing this year, and I'm not a Bears fan, so I haven't watched all the games, but the only ones I can remember are the ones against the Panthers, where he's just throwing to DJ Moore and he's making plays happen. I think the main difference is, like you're talking about, I think he's a little more confident under Thomas Brown. And we've seen with Bryce Young, for example, what being confident can do for you as a quarterback. I think we're both in agreement that the Lions are probably going to, if we're doing our bets or anything, the Lions will probably cover this game. The game that might be the closest, however, probably is going to be the worst, question mark.
Yeah.
But we just saw the Cowboys reel off a victory against the Washington Commanders. This was in Washington as well, I'm pretty sure. So this could be an interesting one. I think that this will be the ugliest one. I think if you TiVo'd the parade and you want to watch the parade with your family, it's probably a good time to do it. Get some early Black Friday shopping done. But if you are a sicko and actually want to watch this game, or if you're one of the 50 million Cowboys fans out there, this is going to be, I think, an ugly game. And I think the number one reason is we're not going to see the Italian stallion Tommy DeVito. Likely won't see him. He popped up with an injury today. So Drew Lock might be the QB. A Drew Lock Cooper Rush QB battle against two bad defenses with interesting defensive fronts, I think is going to be really, really interesting.
Do you trust the Cowboys or the Giants offensive line more?
Ooh. Let,
That's
let me.
that's I think the deciding
I.
factor because you have star number one wide receivers on both teams. Malik Neighbors for the Giants,
Mhm.
CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys. They're tertiary secondary weapons. Quarterbacks, like you said, these are backup guys. Which offensive line's better?
It's not which line's better to me. It's what line is going to do better against the defensive front. And for me, I'm going to say the Giants line is going to do better. And I know it's crazy, right? The
Micah
Cowboys
Parsons and some of the guys they have on that line, that's crazy.
the Cowboys front has to face Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau got activated off of IR last week. Maybe he'll be healthy enough to play a full game this week. Azeez Ojulari is a good rotational guy as well. The Giants offensive line, they gave up 2 sacks against us. Like the game I'm using for reference is the one they played against us. I haven't watched the Buccaneers game yet, but the Buccaneers dominated that game. And Evan Neal, who had to play for them in that game, had 41, pass blocking reps, 1 pressure on those. So if he has improved, I'm not saying he's going to do that against Micah Parsons, but I think the main threat on that Cowboys line is one person. And I think the Cowboys offensive line is going to have to face 2 threats in Lawrence and Brian Burns. And the rookie play from both Guyton and BB has not been inspiring for the Cowboys. I think Lawrence could feast, especially when they don't have a run game to take the pressure off of the O-line. The Giants at least can spam Tyrone Tracy, spam Devin Singletary, who finally scored again this past week. Like, if the things are going bad for them in the passing game, they can at least fall back onto their run game a little bit. I don't think the Cowboys can do that. So I'm going to say I trust the Giants O-line more. That being said, like, I think the Cowboys might pull it off. Like, there were some wacky things in that Washington game, like on special teams. And if Kevontae Turpin can drop the kickoff, like bounced and he dropped it and then picked it back up at like the 2-yard line, and then
That was like
turn that
Deshaun
into
Jackson, but like a kickoff return instead of a punt return.
turn that into a positive return. And then when they try to get the onside kick, the guy just picks up, like, oh, okay, and just runs it in for a touchdown. Like, the special teams might be on their side, but then again, that miracle fluky stuff might not come through. This is one that I have no idea on, truly. And I think I'm just going to fall back to the Cowboys because they're on a little bit of a streak. Who knows? Jerry Jones just said he's not ruling out extending Mike McCarthy because he's a great Super Bowl winning coach. He is a Super Bowl winning coach, but they're very bad this year, and he's not helping that by any means. So I truly have no idea which way to lean in this game. Like, what's your lean in this game? How are you viewing it?
For me, I saw enough in the Commanders game. The Commanders are one of the better running teams in the league. And while they did get ran on, it wasn't obscene amounts. Like we've seen 200-yard rushing games from a lot of different elite rushing offenses. And I think the Commanders were a little over 150. So still a good day on the ground, but they were able to stifle them a little bit there. And really, for the most part, they controlled most of that game on the road. And for I want to lean Cowboys as well for this reason, and it's that they haven't won in Dallas all year. Like, it's Thanksgiving, it's prime time. Like, get your first home victory, and I think that is a huge hammer point. I think the Giants locker room is still reeling from the Daniel Jones cut. Everybody in that locker room knew, even if he did stink, Daniel Jones was the best quarterback on that team. And they felt kind of slighted by that action because of injury protections and what the front office was trying to do to protect their end when they should have just franchise tagged him to begin with and extended Saquon a couple of years ago. And 2020 is hindsight, but it's one of those things where they did the wrong thing and they're recouping that. And I think the locker room at this point, it really has little to play for. And you can see it kind of in the demeanor on the field and even off the field in some of the press conferences.
Yeah, I mean, talk about Saquon, an incredible performance on Sunday night. As a Saquon Barkley fantasy football holder who won me the week, clinched me a playoff spot, I have to applaud him there. But yeah, imagine being a Giants fan with that. Saquon has more rushing production than their entire team does by himself. And I know he wasn't behind the greatest O-line with the Giants, and it probably wouldn't be the same. But to have a guy like that who was like the leader, they don't ship him off, but they don't re-sign him. And then Daniel Jones, who for all his faults, is probably one of the leaders in that locker room. He's one of the longer tenured players on the team, especially with Andrew Thomas being out for the season. Them cutting him unceremoniously in the way that they did. obviously it's going to affect like the players' morale, right? Like, what if somebody's like, hey, I have an injury protection, and what if they want to get rid of me, right? That thought is probably lingering in the back of their head. I didn't even think about the fact that this is their first home game. That actually makes me want to lean more Giants, but I think I'm going to stick with Cowboys on this one. The moral of the story on this is this one's just going to be ugly. Like, we might be looking at a 13 or 14-13 stinker here, folks. But the night game, that is to me the most interesting one, because like, it's the situation of it. It's going to be in Lambeau. It's going to be on at night, so we know it's going to be cold. The forecast is going to hit right around freezing, maybe below. We just saw a blizzard in Cleveland a couple of days ago, so maybe some lake effect moves over to Wisconsin and Green Bay. Who knows? But this is Miami we're talking about. This is Tua Tagovailoa, who is very bad in the cold. He's 0 of 7 in cold games. I think Miami has only played one game below 32 degrees, in the past couple years. Like, that's the starting forecast. And Tua's been really good since he's come back from that concussion injury, but is it going to be enough? And we were talking about this before the recording about like maybe who needs this more and stuff like that. I think the point that I brought up was I think the pressure is really on the Packers in this game because of all that stuff. They're expected to win. They're third in the division now behind the 10-1 Lions and the 9-2 Vikings. Like, I think there's a lot of pressure on them if they even want to sniff a division, like being the winners of the division this year. But yeah, like this one's really interesting to me. This is the one I'm most excited to watch this weekend. How about you? On Thursday, excuse
Thursday,
me. Yeah.
What I will say to start off the day, I'm going to enjoy if the Lions whoop up on the Bears. It's always kind of fun to see a dominant team dominate in prime time, especially when there are other games on that day. And I think exactly like you said, this night game offers a couple intriguing narratives. Tua's 0-7 in like 32 or below degree weather games, so he's not a good quarterback in the cold. Some of the speed kind of gets negated with just how stiff and almost slick the fields get with temperatures like that. And for me, I think the difference is going to be the Packers run game. It is just gone to a different level this year. We saw it with Malik Willis in a couple of his starts. We saw it last week against the 49ers. And I think if they get that rolling, that is going to be the difference maker. Jordan Love isn't going to be forced to carry this team. And again, with those colder conditions, I think some of the speed element that lends itself to the Miami Dolphins offense being so successful will be somewhat negated. And the Packers defense has rallied behind Jeff Hafley and his play calling this year. And they have the ability, I think, to not necessarily dominate, but dictate a little bit of the game script. And that'll help playing at home, playing in front of the home crowd. And it's really just going to come back to the core of this team and what they're able to do both on defense and in the run game.
Yeah, we might see another Xavier McKinney interception. He's up to 7 now, which is bizarre. Talk about players leaving the Giants. The run game, yeah, to me is going to be the difference. Josh Jacobs has been phenomenal all year. If you want to talk about the 3 leading rushers we have this year in the NFL, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, all free agents. They all left their teams and are really thriving in their new environments. The 3 teams that they left have combined for 7 wins. There are teams out there like the Packers who have more than that themselves. So I think the run game has really become an emphasis throughout the league this year, but especially on a cold night in Lambeau. It's going to be below freezing. You know, that's the old grass field that can get slick and get muddy, icy. The Ice Bowl is a famous game there. So I really like the Packers to dictate the game on the ground. But Jordan Love really came along at the end, or not at the end, the second half of last year. I think coming off of a little bit of injuries throughout the season for him, can he string together some strong performances in the second half of this year, like he did in the second half of last year, and then like take that performance going into the playoffs and maybe steal a win or something like that? That's something I want to look for in this game. And going forward is the continued progression of Jordan Love and how is he going to distribute the ball to all the weapons, make the winning plays, all that kind of stuff. Because at the start of the year, when he was on the field, we were seeing like Brett Favre 2020 Jameis levels. Like, yeah, he's throwing 12 touchdowns. He's throwing 12 picks too. Can we like rein that in a little bit and have him play better with the complementary run game and with the defense being better this year? I want to see what the Packers can become down the stretch.
Yeah, no, the next 6 games will be very telling of what kind of team they are. They do play the Lions and the Vikings again. They have some of these interesting home matchups against, I believe, obviously the Dolphins this coming Thursday, but the Saints and the Bears to end the season. So definitely some high stakes football that will determine seeding not only within their own division, but the NFC playoff picture. The only point I want to add before we move on to the next section is kind of offensive points per game for the teams that got those three running backs you're talking about. Derrick Henry for Baltimore, Josh Jacobs for Green Bay, Saquon Barkley for the Philadelphia Eagles. They've averaged, it depends on which team you're looking at. The Eagles are actually averaging fewer points per game than they were at this point last year. Ravens are up about 3 points. The Packers are up about 6. So I think if you're talking about who helped the team the most, I think how the offense has come around Jordan Love, the addition of Josh Jacobs, that's been the biggest needle mover from a points per game standpoint. When you look at the Titans, the Giants, and the Raiders, their points per game, why it's dipped, it's only dipped about like 2 points. So yeah. I don't know how impactful these running backs would have been on bad teams. I think the point that I'm trying to make here, and Ian Hartez on Twitter kind of outlined exactly what I'm talking about. I'm reading these numbers off his graphic, is that good offenses stay good and bad offenses stay bad. And I think if you're in a position where you are making a title run, you have the cap space to add a playmaker like this, it's a smart move. And these teams are showing that they found an edge within the market because of how running backs are treated and paid nowadays. Where I think if you're a bad team, holding on to a player like that is probably more detrimental when you're trying to rebuild.
Yeah, and we saw it with Christian McCaffrey in Carolina, right? Obviously, phenomenal in San Francisco when he was healthy. Broke, it was Jerry Rice's record, right, of consecutive games with a touchdown. Shattered it. He added like 3 games onto it. I guess the point I was trying to make is that it's kind of salt in the wound for these teams. More so Barkley and Derrick Henry in particular. They were like beloved figures in the franchise, faces of the franchise for those two teams. And now they're thriving on teams that are at the top of their respective conferences. The Eagles are just shy of number 1 seed in the NFC. The Packers are obviously up there, and the Ravens, they stumbled a bit, but they had a big win last night, and they'll be up there at the end of the year. So it's not that they would have had these numbers on these poor teams. They obviously wouldn't. The O-lines are worse. The offense and the defense is worse, so it puts them out of a running game script. But it's just hard to look at it like that. Like if I were a Giants fan seeing this, I'd be upset, especially because that's a division rival, right? Like that was more so the point I was trying to make with the new running back acquisitions. And I'm sure the new teams, like you said, who are able to afford that are super happy that they got those players because it'll give them another dimension in the playoffs when they're in those deep playoff runs. Ravens in particular, the Ravens last year just didn't run the ball in the AFC Championship, and look where it got them. But I think that's gonna. We both agree with the Packers, right? Should be a favorite in that game. Yeah,
they should. Like we're gonna take the Packers. I think the biggest thing is like, okay, are the Dolphins gonna have answers for some of these cold weather problems that they faced over the past couple of years? And I think this is going to be a testament to if this is a team worthy of being in the playoffs that can compete on the road, because they aren't going to win their division. So at this point, if they're going to make a run, it's winning these kind of games to prove that they're a team that deserves to be in the conversation.
For sure. And those games that they'll have to go to, unless it's like in LA or something, are going to be cold games in January up north, most like the Bills or something.
You go to Kansas City, you go to Baltimore.
Kansas City, Baltimore. Yeah. I'm trying to think of if
Houston would be a dome, but
maybe Pittsburgh if they take the division back. Who knows? I don't think we're going to be thankful for those games at the end of the day, even though it's Thanksgiving. But because Thanksgiving's coming up, you had a good idea that we need to talk about the 5 Panthers players, themes, what have you, that we're grateful for this year, that we're thankful for. Obviously, I think a market improvement over last year. The morale around the team is better. There's hope, I think, going forward. And I think the thing I am most grateful for this year has to be Chuba Hubbard's emergence as one of the top backs in the league this year. They improved the offensive line. They bring in the 2 big money guards, and behind those guys, he's been on a tear. Obviously, a bit of a downturn versus Kansas City. Kansas City hasn't allowed a 60-yard rusher all year. Chuba got to 58, and then the Chiefs got the ball back, and we didn't get the ball back. So didn't eclipse that 60 yards mark, but he got his touchdown, had his production throughout the season, and he got rewarded, with that production with a $33.2 million contract over 4 years. I'm thankful that we have a bell cow back that we can lean on, and we don't have to thrust Jonathan Brooks in there immediately. We saw a couple snaps, a couple carries for him this week at Kansas City, but I'm thankful Chuba Hubbard, we have somebody to be the engine of the offense, especially early on when Bryce struggled and when Andy Dalton started to struggle after that Raiders game.
Yeah, no, this is a guy that has 876 yards on the year. He's averaging 4.9 yards per carry, and he's got 7 touchdowns on the year. I'm sure that he'll eclipse 1,000 yards rushing, 10 rushing touchdowns. He's been a big reason why this offense has found success when it has this year, and the continue leaning on him while we're bringing Jonathan Brooks up to speed is going to be so critical for, I believe, Brooks' development, and then also getting Chuba to a point where we're not running his tread all the way down. He is extended. He is going to be a Panther for the next couple of years. So keeping that in mind will also be crucial. The second thing we're most thankful for is Bryce Young's resurgence. This seemed like a lost cause after 2 weeks. And we'll get a little bit more into some concerns I have going into the Buccaneers game. But overall, what we've seen over the past couple of weeks after he came back from being benched due to the Andy Dalton injury, which I don't know. There's some rumblings in Panthers Twitter that it's all a scheme and that was all planned. But regardless, glad that Andy Dalton is healthy. It was nothing major, and that Bryce Young had the opportunity that he deserved. That we talked about, he should have been in there for several more weeks, and maybe he would have had improved games against the Raiders and the Bengals to where we would have more film to lean on when we go, hey, Bryce Young is the future, and hopefully he's able to prove that down the stretch. I love that Dave Canales was in support of him. Would love to hear him say over the next couple of weeks that he is the starter the rest of the year, barring injury, but we'll see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, Canales was the QB whisperer, right, with Geno and Baker, and we thought, what, he couldn't do it with Bryce Young? Maybe this was all part of the plan, like you're saying. Show me the MRI on Dalton's thumb, but maybe Bryce just needed a hard reset, because coming back, even in the Denver game where we ended up losing that game, there were encouraging signs. He brought that over to the Saints game, the Giants game, and now the Chiefs game, where he put together an all-around really good performance on the week. Got to be thankful for that. Number 3, and I think the first two couldn't be possible without the number 3 thing on our list, and that's the 2 big guards that we brought in free agency, the big men in the trenches, as you put it. Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, they've not only allowed the run game to take off, and they're a big reason why Chuba is having the success, because as long as you're running behind Robert Hunt, you're getting a hole. Like, he's moving people out of the way. That dude is massive. Damian Lewis has played very well. Cade Mays, who was on our team last year, he was in training camp, cut him, brought him back over the past couple of weeks. He's been, I think, quite good coming off of the Giants practice squad, filling in at center. Brady Christensen, when he's had to fill in, has been quite good. We played him as kind of the XT or the sixth tackle this week. I thought that was a really good wrinkle in the run game for that. But I'm really thankful that all 4 of those guys, even Corbett when he was playing as well, have held up, have pushed the line for Chuba, and have kept Bryce Young upright since he's been back in the fold. He's taken very few sacks, and I think those guys in the middle are a huge reason why.
Oh, 1,000%. The fact that we've been able to go from Austin Corbett to Brady Christensen, the Cade Mays at center, and not skip a beat is a testament to who Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are. And they were the big offseason additions, and they've paid off the dividends. And if they continue playing like this over the next couple of years, this is what's going to allow you to rebuild this offense and rebuild this team from a true pass set grade. When we're looking at just PFF grades, Ben Baldwin puts out these graphics weekly. The Panthers currently ranked 12th. Their tackle play has a 66 grade. Their guard play has a 57 grade, and their center has a 56 play. So again, Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt were brought in to be maulers in the run game, and yet they're still providing above average play when it comes to pass sets. And I think that is really, really good. Like you said, it's the reason why Bryce Young's resurgence has been possible. And so I think that leads into actually the other side of the ball real quickly before we come back to the offense, because I think a lot of the things that we are thankful for this year is rebuilding an offense that looked completely lost last year. But JC Horn's health has been amazing to see. Yeah. He's been a big contributor each week. And if it weren't for the injuries, all in the front seven. I think that this defense would have played a lot better earlier on. JC Horn has even said this in some press conferences after games. Like you're starting to see the potential that this unit has now that we're getting guys back. And I think that's absolutely true when you see DJ Wanham and Jadeveon Clowney have the game that they had in the second half against the Chiefs. And if they're able to keep that up against I would say a slightly underwhelming Buccaneers offensive line, that you have a chance this coming Sunday.
Yeah, and I think even guys like Ashawn Robinson and Josie Jewell, who have come back from injuries where they missed 2 or 3 weeks, respectively, I think that's made quite a bit of a difference. But on the back end, you're right. JC Horn, I think outside of this past week, where you're right, they had a lot of those comeback shallow routes where he wasn't like in their pocket or in their hip. He was just waiting for them to catch the ball and then going and pursuing. He's been locked down throughout the entire year, playing against some tough receivers. Devontae Adams, he was shutting down. Malik Neighbors, he was playing really well against. Even in the Bengals game when he was on Jamar Chase, 1 reception allowed for 6 yards. Like, he's doing his job, and it's really nice to see him playing throughout it's been 11 games so far, and I think his career high is 11 or 12. So we're approaching that, but the fact that he's been healthy, it's been really nice to see. It's been like the biggest bright spot of the DBs, I think, so far. And if he can string this into another year of health and stuff like that, he's going to be rewarded in free agency, because we saw it was Terrell before the season started, right? Patrick Surtain got paid. Yep. Diamador Lenore with the 49ers just got a pretty big deal as well. I think he can parlay his play into another big deal if he can prove that he can stay healthy for an entire season, because we kind of forget that because he missed all that time, we label him as injury prone, but a lot of those were just freak things. Like the first one against the Texans his rookie year, he just stepped and a bone in his foot broke. And like that just randomly happens. You know, I don't know if that's turf or whatever it is, but the fact that he's able to be back healthy is a huge boon for us now. On the other side of the ball, like you talked about, for the thing where I think the fifth thing on our list, I'm not going to rate like what we're most grateful for, what we're most thankful for, but the rookie receivers, the class that Dan Morgan brought in for us, we had hesitations, both of us, after the draft, but Xavier Legette has proven himself as a strong red zone weapon. And I think if he can clean up some of the downfield drops, could be a really nice receiver to end out this rookie campaign. Jatavian Sanders, when he's gotten the opportunity, he's been a huge difference maker at tight end. Like, even as a rookie, he's levels above where Tommy Tremble is, and where Ian Thomas was when he was on the field as a receiver already. So it's great to see him playing this well. Hopefully we can get him back soon. And Jalen Coker, the undrafted free agent from Holy Cross, he's been a revelation since he's been getting the opportunity with Thielen out. Now that Thielen's back, hopefully Coker can still have the opportunity when he is healthy. He was hurt this past week, but going up and high pointing the ball, I think, has been a huge thing for Bryce Young since he's been back in the lineup. I'm thinking of the Saints game. I'm thinking of the Broncos game where he gets that sideline ball down the left side that really started to galvanize the offense in the second half. So all 3 of those guys being good, reliable weapons for the most part for Bryce Young, I think has been a huge part of his resurgence, as has Chuba Hubbard's running, and as has the big like the guards and the centers we've brought in free agency. I think it's all complemented each other, quite well. And that whole unit is something that both of us are clearly pretty thankful for heading into the Thanksgiving week of games.
Absolutely. I think you could argue JT Sanders is maybe the second best tight end from this class, at least so far. Brock Bowers definitely is leagues above him in just terms of production and just playmaking abilities. But when you look at Jalen Coker and the fact that you were able to get him undrafted, I think the only biggest question mark that's going to remain, similar to Mingo last year, is all the wide receivers that went after Legette. You're seeing Ladd McConkey tear it up in Los Angeles. Adonai Mitchell is open in Indianapolis, but with an inaccurate quarterback, they aren't able to capitalize on those opportunities as much. So when you have playmakers like that taken after, you just hope that the Panthers front office leans more into those kind of players moving forward and allows Legette to blossom while he's growing and developing and is able to box out and make some of those big red zone plays. So I'm hoping for a shift in terms of the philosophy of the front office and prioritizing separators and not just big pass catchers. And we'll see if that changes moving forward. But I think that wraps it up for things that we are thankful for right before Thanksgiving. But after Thanksgiving, this Sunday, we have a game at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This would be considered Dave Canales' revenge game. He was their offensive coordinator last year before becoming our head coach. Baker Mayfield, this will be his third time playing the Panthers after he was cut. He was 2-0 last year against Carolina. I'm sure he wants another victory as well this week. And Todd Bowles is familiar with Dave Canales. So it will be very interesting to kind of see the chess match that is going on between the coaches and the players. What are you looking for specifically with this game, and what has you worried the most with this Buccaneers team?
Well, what has me worried is it's actually not Baker, it's not Mike Evans, it's not Kate Otten. We talked about them when we were reviewing the Chiefs game. Their running game is headed by a three-headed monster. Obviously, Rachaad White is the incumbent guy. They've had him for a while. Rookie Bucky Irving is lighting it up down there. And I think they drafted Sean Tucker from Syracuse 2 years ago. But all three of those guys can tote the rock. They're explosive runners in space. It's actually crazy to think about because last year with Rachaad White, their run game really struggled. Like his yards before contact were some of the worst in the league because their line wasn't blocking properly. But with the new scheme, how Liam Cohen has drawn it up for them, all three of those runners are very dangerous. And our run defense isn't the greatest. What gives me hope, however, is while we didn't see a ton of runs from Kansas City this past week, I thought our front did a better job against the run with Kareem Hunt when he was in there, with Steele when he was in there, and then P. Ryan had like 1 or 2 carries when he was in there. Seeing them do better against that group versus like Tyrone Trace, who had 100 yards, Kamara, who had like 1,000 yards against us a couple weeks ago, I think that gives me more hope. But I think that's the path forward for the Bucs to get going on offense is their running backs. However, it's the flip, or like it's the same for us. Their run defense is very poor as well. I want to see Chuba getting the ball and rushing a lot. And I want to see Jonathan Brooks get more than 3 carries because he averaged like 4 yards per carry. Not great, but once he's hitting the ground running, I want to see what he can do because, frankly, their entire defense, not only their front, is not super scary. I think when you can get runs into the second and third level, you'll be able to break free. So that's what I'm looking for. What about you?
Yeah, I think the Panthers' run game is definitely going to be the bread and butter this week. You're going to have to lean into that to stay in this game. The Buccaneers have shown that they can be an offense that can drop 30, 40 points in a game. This is not a good Carolina Panthers defense, so there are a lot of concerns on that front. Obviously, you kind of outlined their three-headed monster in the backfield and how that's been effective for them as of late. For me, when I look at this game, I'm more concerned about what Bryce Young is going to face against Todd Bowles' defense. He's about league average after the first 11 weeks. I haven't seen the numbers yet come out because some of it hasn't been fully disclosed. But his EPA numbers against man was around league average before last week against the Chiefs. That'll obviously go up. Faced a lot of man coverage with some of the Spagnuolo blitzes. However, he is dead last in terms of efficiency when you look at expected points added against zone. Todd Bowles, known for having zone schemes while bringing some exotic blitz looks. Then he's going to play Vic Fangio next week, who is known for his cover 4, cover 6 variations. He has Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell to work with on that back end, and they have been phenomenal as rookies. So those two matchups moving forward for Bryce Young, since he has been so inefficient against zone, will be very interesting to see. Because if he gets kind of rattled and we start seeing some of the Bryce Young that we saw earlier in the year, like we did against the Chargers when Jesse Minter deployed some various zone schemes, that will be kind of the interesting point. And can he win the game? We talked about last week going in against the Chiefs. He was going to have to find his tertiary guys, Adam Thielen, JT Sanders, David Moore. And we saw all those guys play a very large contributing factor in that game against the Chiefs. Well, this week, we're going to have to see Bryce Young dissect the defense, know where he's going with the football, and not make mistakes. That's how you're going to stay in this game and avoid losing to the Buccaneers at home. So if that doesn't happen, I don't think a lot of the other things that we are talking about will fall into place.
For sure. And hopefully with Thielen back, he could be like the zone guy. Veteran, knows where to be on the field. And he and Bryce had a huge rapport last year. So hopefully he can be that safety valve guy. We saw David Moore get really involved last week. So hopefully everybody can hopefully Coker can play. I'm not going to expect JT Sanders to play coming off that scary neck injury, but hopefully everybody can get involved. With that in mind, with what we've talked about, we're going to get into perfect take territory. And for me, I think this is going to be a shootout. So the current line, or at least before we started recording, was 46.5 as the over-under. I think it's going to go well past that. My take is that the Panthers and Buccaneers will combine for 55 or more points on Sunday. That's 28-27. I think we're well within that realm. I think both teams could push over 30, to be quite frank. If we could get 27 against the Chiefs, I think we could approach 30, 34, whatever like a round number for touchdowns and field goals is, like in that range. I think we could approach that. I think the Buccaneers could get there too. So I think it's going to be high scoring, and hopefully the Panthers can pull it off in the end.
Yeah. One last thing to add before I have my perfect take. Mike Evans just passed Randy Moss for the most defensive pass interference yards. So one thing to kind of keep an eye out with the JC Horn Mike Evans matchup is Mike Evans able to draw a few flags, even if a deep pass attempt isn't able to get completed. Will that kind of allow them to keep driving down? We saw Mike Evans have that huge game in Tampa Bay last year when they beat us. So again, it's one of those things. I definitely agree that this could be a high scoring affair. Mike Evans could be a big part of that. The perfect take that I have is I think at least 6 out of the 11 road teams, so over 50% of the teams on the road on Sunday, will pull off victories. So you have Houston traveling to Jacksonville, Indianapolis traveling to New England, Los Angeles, the Chargers traveling to Atlanta, Seattle traveling to the Jets, Tennessee traveling to Washington. They just upset Houston on the road. That could be an interesting one to watch. The division leading Pittsburgh Steelers travel to Cincinnati. You have Arizona heading to Minnesota. Arizona heading to Minnesota. I think I just put those two words together. The Los Angeles Rams traveling to New Orleans. Tampa Bay obviously traveling to Carolina. Philadelphia heading to Baltimore. Should be a banger of a game. And then is San Francisco at Buffalo? Is that a Monday or is that a...
That's Sunday night.
That's what I thought it was Sunday night. So I definitely think some of these home teams are going to pull off the victory between teams like the Bills, maybe even the Commanders. But I think there are a lot of these teams on the road that are favorites or have the ability to go and win a tight game. So that's my perfect take for this week. And that's about all I have.
Well, hopefully if your take comes true, the Bucs are not among the road teams that are able to pull off a victory. You gave some breathing room. You said 5 home teams can win. So hopefully the Panthers are one of them. I think that's going to do it for us. No episode on Thursday. It's Thanksgiving. We'll both be with our families, I assume. That's where you'll be. That's where I'll be. So hopefully everybody is going to have stuff to be thankful for this week. It's been a tumultuous football season so far, but it looks like we're on the upturn. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your podcasts. As for myself, as for Steve, we are Purrfect Takes. We will see you guys next Tuesday after a hopeful Panthers win. Keep pounding.